Hello and welcome to this, what day is it, Thursday, free
it's
episode.
It's a fucking free one, mate.
Milo.
We're getting it free, cunt.
Milo is joining us from Australia.
That's right.
And we have Alice joining us from Glasgow.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
We have Hussein joining us from just having eaten about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, it feels like Australia in my mind. I don't know what that means. I just miss Australia a lot.
We're all in various kinds of Australia. I'm in sort of like Northern Australia. You know, Milo's in Australian
Alice is in the
Australia.
Northern Territory.
Yeah.
Hussein's in Australia of the mind. I'm in Australia of the soul. And joining us is migrants' rights campaigner Zoe Gardner, who has been on the show, I think now, 3 times. So please enjoy your complimentary Prosecco.
Thank you for having me. And I guess I'm in Australia of the horrible refugee policies.
Yeah.
So it's just regular Australia. Saves time, you know. It's
that's just the same Australia that Milo is in. Yeah. And it's really
so early.
You're in it, but you're disagreeing with it, which is fair enough.
That's right. We are going to, of course, be talking all about the application of the Nationality and Borders Bill, the Tories' decision to take what Australia showed us was a winning political slogan, "Stop the boats," and put it on a big lectern. How are the Liberals doing, by the way, in Australia? Are they good? Are they doing well?
I presume they're still in power. Tony Abbott ate an onion that time. How do you vote against that?
Was it Barnaby Joyce or was it like one of the prime ministers who had like a trophy or something in his office with
It was Tony Abbott, I believe.
Boats? Was
I
it?
stopped these on a boat.
Oh my god. Okay,
God.
well, you know, one of those is going begging now. So, you know, Rishi can sort of like get on eBay, like if he's willing to pay the shipping from Australia, and we can just do it all over again.
That's right. But before we do all of
Guys, I stopped the boats.
God,
I'm working on my Sunak.
It's not as good as your Starmer.
No.
Before and of course as well, there are some things that you might be wondering. Are we going to talk about it? The answer is the sort of upcoming Trump indictments and Balaji Srinivasan's insane Bitcoin bet. Those are coming in the bonus, which we've already recorded. So hold tight. And are we going to be talking about the decision that now seems to be the opinion rather that now seems to be respectable to hold, which is the Met Police shouldn't exist, and we're going to be talking about that in a future episode. So I wanted to start though by revisiting an old friend of ours, Mr. Brian Cue Ball Armstrong, the man who decided that he didn't want to waste time at Coinbase saying pronouns and having a safe space. Now appears to have attracted the ire of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. That's right.
If you remember the documentary that we saw about Coinbase, where the sort of like central failing of it was watching this very bald man spend 10 minutes trying to pay for one donut using Coinbase, I feel like what happened is the transaction has finally gone through and he has just been instantly tackled by like 5 federal agents.
Yeah, 5 federal agents wearing different alphabet agency windbreakers.
Yeah. In the same way that like the FBI will set people up with like a fake bomb and then jump them the second they go and like plant it somewhere, that like the latency time on that donut transaction was the only thing saving him from like whatever SEC charges he's currently facing.
Yeah, in fact, his legal advice was just slow it down. This is the only thing keeping you out of jail.
Yeah, just get your PIN number wrong a bunch of times, you know.
So he said, after years of asking for reasonable crypto rules, we're disappointed that the SEC is considering courts over constructive dialogue. But if courts are required, so be it. Which is tough talk for someone who sold a huge number of shares before any of these allegations were made public.
That's extremely divorce court language there. The wife has rejected dialogue. She's taking me to court.
She's taking me to court. She's taking my crypto. All my apes jailed.
Yeah, my wife's getting custody of the apes.
So that's revisiting Coinbase. I think we can all issue a hearty good luck to Brian Armstrong in his fight for justice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about commemorative Coinbase? Could that be a thing, you know, where you just pay for your petrol with a Princess Diana fiver?
Probably takes about the same amount of time, too.
No. There's one other thing I want to talk about before we get into the startup, which is, of course, it is 2023, the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War. And wouldn't you know it, the mea culpas are flying thick and fast from some of the people responsible for promoting or spinning or planning it. They just seem to lack much mea or culpa, more of a, wow, this went really badly. Who could possibly have... Whoa, whoever let this happen really played a stinker.
Who could possibly have predicted this? Many people, including me, and I was working with the considerable impediment of being 12. Like, I knew it was a bad idea. But, like, strangely, they didn't listen to me at the time, so...
Guardian leader entitled "Hindsight is 2020 when it comes to the Iraq War" by Mea Culpa.
So have you seen much of this, Zoe, flying around?
Yeah, it's been difficult to miss. I mean, it's depressing, obviously, but it is hilarious, the sort of scramble to be the one who is redeemed by sufficiently quickly saying, oh yeah, no, it turns out that was a pretty bad idea. Nobody seems to be really reckoning with conversations with the families of people killed or anything like that. Sorry, I'm such a downer when I come on your podcast. Like, you guys are funny around me and I talk about horrible shit.
No, it just means your brain is working.
Yeah. That just means that you have correctly assessed the world around you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but talking of like experts warning people about things going wrong, I mean, I wish that, people would listen to that a bit more often. I mean, and we're going to talk about it later, but we've got a new bill before Parliament that we're saying will make everything worse for refugees. They brought one in a year ago, and everything I told them would happen has happened, and it's just extraordinary. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait 20 years and see, but...
and you might get like the person who is like probably most responsible individually for migrant deaths is gonna like do a podcast with Rory Stewart.
I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised that no one has tried to do the whole like they haven't tried to write some sort of column about how we had the Iraq War and now we have the Iraq War. I feel like someone has tried to do that. I was like, no, it just doesn't.
The unwoke roar.
Look, okay.
Some editor of the Sunday Times is like desperately trying to make it.
People will literally
in.
start the Iraq War, but not fight the unwoke roar. Interesting.
So I think Andrew Doyle, Brendan O'Neill, if you're listening, put your strange, gigantic heads together and please write this article.
Absolutely.
Alice, you mentioned the podcast with Rory Stewart.
This really blackpilled me. This like a profoundly depressing experience that like so many people were like, oh, this is like, you know, a historically important document. It's like a bipartisan sort of like reasonable compromise across the aisle with the guy who had David Kelly hounded to suicide and like a guy who looks like a fucked horse ghost. Cool. Great.
Yeah, so this is number one. I bristle at even anyone else describing a podcast as an important historical document, but we'll go on. So what Alice is referring to, of course, is Alistair Campbell's cutesy little project with Rory Stewart, where they have a little bit of fun with the news, called The Rest is Politics. Now, I put myself through a lot for the listeners. I read a lot. I watch terrible shit. I listen to terrible shit. I write it down to represent it to my friends and you because you all seem to enjoy it for some reason. I am presenting you a quote from the podcast episode by Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart on the Iraq War that was transcribed in an article about the podcast because I refuse to fucking listen to it. You're not worth it. I'm sorry.
But you did read the transcript.
Yeah.
I would do anything for love. I won't do that.
This is what they said. For all those soldiers who were killed, who died, and for all the other people who were killed and injured, for all the trouble there has been, I can make the case that a lot of the aftermath problems were created by forces who would be doing terrible things were not there, and might even have been doing it there. But at the same time, I recognize that it's one of those things that you wish you could just put into the category of of it never happened. Damn, I wish we could have put that into that fucking category, Alistair.
That was such a circumlocutory way of saying we shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we shouldn't have done it, but I am saying that, you know, in an imaginary world where we hadn't done it, that might be preferable to the world we live in, which is the world where we have done it.
It's also completely like suspending cause and effect. This idea that like the forces, right, that we were fighting against in Iraq, whether that was sort of like the Shia death squads or Sunni death squads or Iran, like all of those things, those would have just happened anyway. Like why? Prove it to me. Why is that the case? Why would there not be a causal link between us like destabilizing the like authoritarian government, holding it all together, and like keeping those things from being in play? Why would it just have collapsed on its own? Why would we have had to do anything about it? And even if we had, wouldn't that still have been better than doing it on what we knew to have been a lie? Does that just have no moral valence anymore? And I know the answer is yes, because Alistair Campbell is a demon, right? But like, at least let me ask that, you know?
Yeah, and like Iraqis being consistently among the top 5 nationalities of people crossing the channel in small boats, like, would that have needed to happen?
Well, we can go on, in fact, and we can say what Rentoul said in his "Not Mea, Not Culpa."
Fuck me, Jesus Christ!
Because I'm afraid
Blair Renfield.
I'm afraid the man who's combined Dracula and Renfield has said regarding what you said, Alice.
I'm my own Renfield.
He says,
he said, myself.
I do not drink wine. That's what he said.
Yeah. So he says, no one can know what would have happened if Saddam Hussein had been left alone, parenthetically going on. Although,
yeah, that's like saying the guy that I shot, right? He could have turned out to be Hitler. We don't know. He could have had a full life. We don't know, right? And therefore, Your Honor, I haven't done anything wrong. It's like, no, the fact
it's
that
like
you
30p Lee
forestalled
with
all
the
those
death penalty.
possibilities. Yeah. Mm-hmm,
Nobody
absolutely.
commits a crime after being like having the death penalty happen to them.
Well, Saddam Hussein certainly hasn't. So
I'm going to read that again because there's a parenthetical that really is going to bake your noodle. No one can know what would have happened if Saddam Hussein had been left alone, parenthetical, although Bashar al-Assad's civil war in Syria provides one analogy, suggesting that though like
the relaxation vein is in full effect. Yeah, famously, something in which we have absolutely no exposure, the Syrian civil war. Fucking Christ. The goal of these people.
And so, it's this idea of, well, we did it, and clearly a bunch of bad things happened because we did it. But what if something worse had happened, and I kind of wish we didn't? However, it is crucial that me and everyone who agrees with me and all of my friends and everyone who thought we should do it gets a gimme on that one and every other thing. That we still have to attach ourselves with vice-like claws to the public of this country. Then we will never fucking we will never free them of our just terrible husks. We are inflicting ourselves on them forever.
It robbed us of the potential fail-son regime of Uday and Qusay Hussein.
That's true.
Can you imagine just like Rishi Sunak having to have a meeting with someone who's just got like a gold AK on the table? Like that would have been awesome.
I mean, yeah, YouTube president. But like the fundamental lie here, right? The lie that they started telling before the invasion and that is they're still telling now is that this was not a war of choice, that we were not proactive about it. We were only reactive, right? We didn't have any agency here. And, all of these bad actors, they're all acting. They would have acted anyway. And hey, it's a bad neighborhood. Stuff happens. And, we were sort of, our hand was forced. And it's like, you could almost forget that they, confected a reason to invade a country and did it because they wanted to and felt absolutely no remorse about it.
Yeah, well, what if they were going to do the plot of the Michael Bay film The Rock? But the last thing about this, right, is just an observation as well. This is also from Rentoul's column. He says, it also changed us in less obvious ways. And by us, I mean we British. I don't think it has had as much of an effect on the Americans. And that's actually got me thinking, like, in the U.S., you do not see nearly as many of the Iraq War cheerleaders still in public life. You see the columnists, yes, but you don't see, like, the Alistair Campbell equivalent, still insisting on inflicting themselves on the American people.
I mean, there's a couple like Thomas Friedman, but like Douglas Feith, for instance, is not like in the New York Times. But like,
well, you know where those guys are, though. The Bush guys are. They're all like they're the ones that are still alive. Well, like fucking Rumsfeld's dead. The ones that are still alive, they're just off like on the board of Prospera or running a hedge fund or doing these. They're not still insisting that they need to be important and prominent and political in public.
We can't say what Rumsfeld would be doing if he was still alive. That is an unknown.
Yeah. Shooting more of his friends in the face. I have a theory about this, and that's that, like, Britain has about 5 people in it, for the most part. And, like, and yet
and
the
they're
fact
all on
that
this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But we have to feel like we're competing with the US in the sort of, like, takes complex, right? Which means we are trying to sustain a US number of pundits and columnists and stuff on a population that does not begin to equal the US's. And so none of these people ever go anywhere. That's why like everyone is seemingly a newspaper columnist, and why they have these like eternal lives in print is because we can't afford to get rid of them, because you know we can't just reach in and pull a Barry Weiss or whatever out of our educational system, because there's only a couple of them.
We cannot allow a columnist gap with our closest neighbors and allies. Look,
we need to be built. We need to be like grooming the kind of the dipshits of tomorrow, like Barry Weiss, and we're not doing that. And that's the real sort of like national security.
It's the only exports we really have left.
We're going to need some. We need to train up our next generation of just toxic public morons.
Where is our next Christopher Hitchens?
Given how pathetic a lot of the Iraq War cheerleaders' excuses are, I think they should start going with just like more entertaining excuses. I want to see at least one of them be like, look, I really enjoyed Bravo 20 by Andy McNabb, and I thought this was the best way of getting a sequel.
I'm sorry, I was hungry, I pushed the wrong button.
I'm mental health.
Sleepy. With that finger error, I pushed yes, I meant no.
I accidentally put a comma in no Iraq War.
So I want to add just a little bit of TF flavor to the proceedings before we proceed to talk about the bill, our main topic of discussion, because did I have it's actually a matched pair of startups that do something very similar, but that are annoying in 2 different ways. So do we want to start with Sheaf or Dish Divvy?
Both of these sound like slurs. Like something you would get called in a Victorian novel. Like throwing sort of a wet rag at the scullery maid and calling her a dish divvy.
So we're going to start with our guest. We're going to start with Sheaf. It's SHEF.
Is that not chef?
No, it's Sheaf.
Oh.
Does it have the
I thought it was chef
over
also.
The E for like a long E?
I thought it was chef also, but they provide a definition of this new word that they've created that's a portmanteau of 2 other words, and so it actually is probably sheaf.
Oh,
wow.
No. I really hate that already.
Does it have something to do with condoms?
No, it actually does not.
Googling best condom and this company comes up.
Hussein. Sheaf.
Sheath.
SHEF.
Sheaf.
I don't know. I mean, my initial impulse is to sort of say that it's a new sort of leadership position for women.
It is for women, or at least it's marketed to women.
The she certainly kind of gave it away.
Yeah. That's it always does. All right.
Wait, so is it like she chief? Like the lady chief?
Almost. You were so close. Just take out that I.
She chef?
Yes.
Oh,
correct.
wow. So this is for like women who newly cook.
This is for women who cook.
I thought you said it wasn't so tortured. So it is chef, but they're insisting on the long E because of the she. That's terrible.
Yeah. Oh, this is not the most. This is not the most terrible thing about it. Not by a long shot. So they say sheaf, noun. 1, a combination of she and chef. 2, in honor of mothers and parents everywhere who do so much to support and nourish their families and communities.
They could have done she chef, which is kind of a pun on sous chef. That would have sounded better, I think.
No. Well, so at Sheaf, we're rebuilding the food system from scratch, redefining who can participate in the food economy, and returning personal connection to the making.
There's something really funny about this. To be like, imagine if women could cook. Like, imagine if women were allowed into the kitchen. And it's like, at a professional level, sure, but like...
Yeah, it is a very funny area of misogyny where it's like women should do the cooking at all times unless they're being paid for it, in which case they're obviously not capable of doing that and only men should do it.
So
women can only cook if it's unpaid.
So this is sort of the let's say, what they're saying they're trying to solve. So they say, at Sheaf, we're rebuilding the food system from scratch, redefining who can participate in the food economy, and returning personal connection to the making, eating, and sharing of food. We are...
Don't say the food economy.
We are an online marketplace for local, certified cooks to connect with customers in their community and earn a meaningful income selling homemade dishes.
Local mums in your area!
Have they just invented a restaurant?
No.
It's worse than that. What they've done is there's not enough women in professional restaurants and professional cooking. Fine, right? Therefore, in order to get women into it, we're going to make the professional cooking more like home cooking, which women already expected to do.
It's so belittling on so many levels.
Yes,
it feels like an outdated take, right? That to say like, oh, the she version of something is like, that's belittling to say that women can be the she version of something. We can just be the thing. Like that feels like a 90s feminist take. Why are they making me make a 90s feminist take?
So this is I'll add to this a little bit. It's not just reinventing a restaurant, and it's not just bringing women into professional cooking by making it like home cooking. It's saying, what if we took the Airbnb, Deliveroo, Uber model and pushed it back up the value chain? And what if we basically said, hey, instead of having a restaurant, we can do to restaurants what Uber did to taxi services and have, again, women who we're empowering, by the way, supply their own facilities, power, time, and then what they're going to do is they're going to cook the food. And then it's going to be delivered by one of our delivery drivers, and they're going to get paid per meal. So what we've done is taken the Uber piecework model, and it's because it's like you look at Deliveroo and you're like, I sure do wish that more of the people involved in the producing and distribution of this food could be subject to the same working conditions as this. And they figured it out.
I wish it was called Deliveroo.
I wish it was called that too. So
I had another one as well. Just
go, please.
Uber Sheets.
What if you took a restaurant and turned it into a restaurant?
Yeah, perfect.
I'm here all day.
Yeah, excellent.
Just typing the dust off my shoulders.
Yeah. Sheaf, hire us. Poacher turned gamekeeper. Come on. They say, more than anything, the power of homemade food comes from the love and care of those who make it. Again, under gig economy conditions, who are technically, according to the 1099 forms they would file in California, independent contractors with no rights.
Also, but like, women have been like expected to do home cooking since like for fucking thousands of years or whatever. What about this is supposed to be revolutionary other than just selling it?
This also just feels like they're just trying to turn every home into a ghost kitchen.
Yes, that's the idea.
Right? That sort of feels like the thing that's missing, which is like when you open up the kitchen and you turn it into a place that makes things for money, then that is not a kitchen. That is not a home kitchen anymore by the very definition of it. And you can sort of wrap it up. And the thing is, like, restaurants already sort of do this anyway. I don't really do delivery very much, but a couple of times I've been on, like, lots of like small restaurants market themselves as like, you know, home cooking places. So the only thing that this would do is
like
but it's a woman who cooked it this time.
Yeah, a woman cooks
so
it.
that's what makes it like brings back the sort of personal touch to it. It's because women have a personal touch. Actually, men have an impersonal touch.
And also no employment rights.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah. No, that's impersonal.
Well, because you're working from your home.
If they have rights, that's impersonal.
This is fucking founded by Silvia Federici. Like
so they say, at Chef, we're bringing the sharing economy to the table. Now, Zoe, you might want to hold on to something for this next sentence because I think it's going to it's quite a doozy.
Okay.
We believe in providing our chiefs, who are often refugees, immigrants, and stay-at-home parents, the opportunity to make a meaningful income from their very own kitchens.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, no, they're not just women, they're also refugees, and that makes it twice as personal. In fact, this time it's internal.
When I see refugees coming to this country, I don't think of them as refugees. I think of them as chiefs.
What is a refugee but a future chief?
I really should work for their marketing department. I feel like I feel like they're missing out on a lot of stuff.
You're doing like an
feels very
unpaid, like an
obvious.
interview for it right now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I'm doing it from my kitchen.
But it's
Yelling
so
at some other brave
random.
men, like, don't you realize this woman could be making you a tuna pasta bake next week?
Sorry, Zoe.
The thing is,
please
again,
go.
it's still like the ghost kitchen model, because like I vaguely remember reading when Mr. Beast was doing the Beast Burger thing. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I vaguely remember the article kind of being like the people who are sort of making these burgers are like immigrants and refugees. They have worked for like other, or they have worked in sort of other kitchens, and all that's happened is that like the Beast branding has kind of gone on it. So effectively,
Mr. Beast gave 2,000 starving people a burger.
VMOs is literally just like, okay, well, if, you know, instead of having a commercial kitchen where you have like lots of immigrants in a very small space making fast food, you can get women immigrants do it at their homes. And then this brings up another question too, which is like, well, it also depends on their housing and depends on how many people are in the apartments that they live in, or whether those apartments have functioning kitchens that are necessary to...
But Hussein, what if it was Mrs. Beast?
Yeah, you ever think of that?
I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, checkmate.
So again, it's the same thing, right? Of like Uber frees the company making all the money from the cab rides from the need to own the cabs. Instead, what happens is the taxi driver or car service, the car service drivers then have to pay for the cabs and pay for the gas and pay for the insurance. It's the same thing where now, hey, you run your own kitchen, you pay for your gas, you pay for your power, you pay for your insurance, you pay for your stove. If it breaks, you fix it. It's a way of having, it's ingenious, really. It's a way of having a ghost kitchen without even having to invest in the fucking ghost kitchen. It's making your workers all build your kitchen for you and distribute it throughout the city, which is evil, but ingenious, but evil. Sorry, Zoe, you were going to say something.
I mean, I've probably forgotten about 12 things I was going to say, but I mean, it's just crazy because, like, yeah, I mean, Deliveroo, which is pretty much synonymous with like the exploitation of migrant workers specifically, and it's just taking that like platform model and applying it to, I guess, like private chef or catering, home catering sort of model. And what does this bring? And then they just sprinkle a few words like woman and refugee on it to sort of make it sound woke. I mean, like, who falls for this shite?
I can tell you exactly who falls for it.
Venture capitalists.
Yeah, number one, Andreessen Horowitz fell for it. Also,
once again, the Stormbreaker money being put to bad use.
so Sheaf has raised over $20 million since its founding in 2018. I think has raised more since. It was founded by Alvin Salahi, a former White House technology advisor under Barack Obama and the founder of Code.gov.
Oh, I love the whiz kids. They're so cool. This is like Cal Penn's character on fucking Designated Survivor, is what this is.
Before we go on to our main topic, I've got another one. Dish Divvy, which basically does the same thing. But there was an article in TechCrunch where they interviewed the founder, Annie Tarosian, and I just couldn't leave the quotes on the table. Tarosian said, "I am now a busy working parent, and although I love to cook, we always have the dinner dilemma of what to eat. I have a mother-in-law who is also a good cook, and I kept thinking," again, these next words are quite a doozy, so do look out. "I kept thinking about how to productize what she was doing."
Wow.
I tried to package up my mother-in-law, folks.
I watched my mom caring for my family, and I just thought there's got to be some profit to be made in that.
Rodney Dangerfield voice. "I tried to package up my mother-in-law."
Yeah, I simply love looking at my parents and the people I care about and think about how can I use them to extract goods and services.
Yeah, just seeing your mother-in-law like preparing some home cooked meal and just like a sailor marooned in a desert island, she just turns into a cash flow diagram.
Yeah, well, you know, your mother can start by making like really nice traditional food that like you kind of grew up with, and then when you realize that actually the real profits are in burgers, you can demand her to like then make Mr. Beast burgers.
Imagine a burger. Yeah, I mean, I love the way startup people talk. I find it endlessly. I mean, even just saying like fucking the dinner dilemma that we face every day. It's just like most people manage to surmount this.
Every day in our daily lives.
But this is what it is. Like, it's just a couple of steps on from something that's totally reasonable, right? Because like, I mean, there are like great like small businesses, restaurants run by like migrants or refugee communities in all over London, and they they talk about themselves like social enterprise type things, like within the same language. It's just like one little step further where people have said, okay, that ticks all the right boxes in terms of like appealing to, woke demographics or something in London. But just make it, just push it over so that it's horrible and exploitative. It's just insane.
Yeah, well, but the question, they see all of these like, let's say cooperatively owned businesses or whatever, and they say, how can Andreessen Horowitz profit by becoming a middleman here?
Yeah. Andreessen Horowitz hates the shallow market kebab house.
Yeah, it's shoving some tech bro into the middleman space. Exactly that.
So I'll go on. The reason for its success was that it was providing tools to take the boring business stuff out of running a business to help people focus on their craft. The boring business stuff, like making the money off of the thing that you sell and not having to give 15 to 25% of it to a platform that, well, it doesn't directly set your prices because it's pooling you with everybody else. Probably like causes you to have to match everyone else's prices.
And again,
directly.
the assumption that like migrants or women, they don't have those like clever numbers, business brains. They just want to get down to like, the cooking of the nice nurturing food. It's all, it's so patronizing.
They just are one-way conduits for love, and then we'll unburden them of all of that boring old money that they didn't need or want.
Commoditized and packaged up this authenticity, and then sort of removed it.
Conduit for Love feels like a great like 80s stadium rock
That's
tune.
a Richard Highsmith song.
Yeah.
Nate, take a note of this. Conduit for Love, please. Let's have Richard Highsmith do this.
Yeah,
So basically, the value proposition, they say this directly. They're like, we want to do for cooking what DoorDash did for delivery.
Immiserate it.
Yeah, obliterate it. Because they're just like, we saw there was another step in the value chain to like step back and precarize and burden workers. And again, this one ends like the sheaf bit ends. Tarosian has also been on the advocacy team leading the passage of California Bill AB 626, the California Homemade Food Act, which has paved the way for legislation around home kitchen operations into 44 cooking bills across 29 states since 2018.
Oh boy.
So the person who owns the company also wrote the law.
Great.
Yay!
Cool. Not a conflict of interest.
Yeah. Well, I think that that they're clearly the expert on home cooking and doing all of. I mean,
hey, why would I ever break the law? I wrote the dang thing.
So that's Sheaf and Dish Divvy. A real rager of a startup, I think this time. Just a real hearty fuck you to the owners of Dish Divvy and Sheaf.
So far, Riley, you've put together an infuriating episode. I hope we have something nice and light following this segment up.
If you were in the studio, you would see me frantically tugging at my collar, googling like hooning or something.
Well, actually, I've got something light for you. This is quick. My cousin and I decided to go and have a surfing lesson yesterday, and I got to meet one of a genre of guy I think exists primarily in Australia, something I like to call the nature himbo. And he's just like driving us out to this remote beach, like through a forest, and he's just going like, yeah, like the forest is like, it's really cool because like there's all kinds of like plants and like critters in there, and they're just kind of getting along. That's pretty cool. And like he's completely shirtless while he's doing this, and he's like,
Beautiful.
you just think like thousands of years ago, like before there were roads or like people driving on them, there were just indigenous people in there just eating stuff. It was like their supermarket. So that's pretty cool. And he just kept saying that's pretty cool after everything.
You know what? It is pretty cool, to be fair.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. He's correct. This is one. I imagine he's also super ripped, so this is one cool guy.
Yeah, he was pretty jacked.
Well, that startup was enraging, but ultimately good fun. And yet now, of course, because we are talking about the UK's immigration, refugee, and asylum system, it is time for another TF jarring shift in tone. This is from a press release couple weeks ago. It says, earlier this year, the Prime Minister made stopping the boats one of his 5 promises to the British people. The Stop the Boats, or illegal migration bill, will fulfill that promise by ending illegal entry as a route to asylum in the UK. So, how does this fit together with stuff like Nationality and Borders Bill? How does it fit together with, I'd say, like the political priorities of all of the great and the good that we discussed so much, like some of the people we might have discussed earlier on, who are very not sorry about what they didn't do in terms of the Iraq War. Can you just give us a little bit of table setting?
Sure, yeah. So this is a new bill that it basically it's the Nationality and Borders Act Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, and with all the fascistic sort of implications of using that term. What it does is it says that anybody who enters the UK through an irregular route of any kind, so not just actually on boats, but in the back of a truck, or employing any kind of deception in order to enter the UK, or, for example, if the person trafficking them employed deception to get them to enter the UK. Anybody who falls under that category.
Why?
Whatsoever.
These are just chiefs, officer.
They will They will have their asylum claim deemed inadmissible, so they will not be allowed to apply for refugee protection in the UK at all, ever. So the difference between this and its predecessor, the Nationality and Borders Act, which became law just a year ago, is that that act tried to do the same thing, but it said, okay, but if after 6 months, or around 6 months, we can't get rid of you, then okay, we will actually examine your claim. And also, if you're a victim of modern slavery or trafficking, we will examine your claim. And, there were certain opt-outs, carve-outs. It's incredible to me. It genuinely is blowing my mind right this second that I'm talking about the Nationality and Borders Bill as having had humanitarian exceptions to it. But that's where we're at now. This bill has no exceptions. It imposes a duty on the Home Secretary to remove anybody at all, regardless, where they come from, what they've suffered, whether they're a man, woman, or a child, and to detain them as well for a minimum period, no maximum period, but a minimum period of 28 days, and then to remove them literally anywhere. But obviously it links up to the Rwanda scheme, and we can talk a bit about that, but overall, there isn't the systems in place to remove them to many places. It doesn't, fortunately, yet override the obligation on us not to remove somebody to a country where their life and safety will be at risk. So people cannot just simply be returned to countries that they're coming from where their life and safety will be at risk, like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Eritrea. And these are the main countries that people are coming from in the asylum system. So they can't be sent back there. Some of them maybe could be sent to Rwanda. But for the rest of them, it leaves them in limbo for the rest of their lives, with never any right to any kind of status in the UK. And even if they were to then have children in the UK, those children would never have any right to any kind of status in the UK. So it really is pretty much as grim as I can imagine. But I say that with the caveat that, I thought the Nationality and Borders Act was as grim as we would get. And they can always get worse. So, watch this space, because what this is really about is so evidently runs counter to many of our international legal obligations. This is about laying the ground for having a big fight about it in the courts, and then standing the next election on the basis of withdrawing from those international human rights mechanisms that protect all of our rights. So, yeah.
And the human rights lawyer in charge of the opposition seems to be somewhat missing in action, with the main labor response being, you promised to stop the boats. The boats are still coming. How have you not stopped the boats? We would stop the boats more effectively. Essentially surrendering entirely the framing, not just the framing, but the goals, the methods, surrendering whether or not this is a moral and just thing to do, because we sort of decided, I think, that politics is about the exercise of technical skill to achieve a number of set ends that just are given to us from the heavens, I suppose, that are sort of spring autochthonous from the ground in this country.
The government is trying to stop the boats in the wrong way. We need to go about it in a more sensible way. We need to meet these boats halfway across the channel and say, look, Britain is shit. Why do you want to come here? Honestly, the continent is a lot better. They still have roads that function. Give them a go.
So it's so Braverman, and even then, right?
Just a border force guy on a speedboat holding up a series of large placards of shit English towns.
Oh, but you joke,
are you
but
sure?
they did. They went and they put up posters. This has been something we've been doing for ages. And, you know, we pay for this to be done by the Home Office. They put up posters in countries of origin and countries of transit saying, don't come to the UK, it's not that great. I promise you, they actually do this for real. Like, satire's dead.
I mean, at least they're being honest. You know what? It's like one of the few things the British government does that is honest is saying, don't come to the UK, it's bad.
So this is even while Starmer is agreeing with the substance, but suggesting essentially that they have been a little bit reckless in its application, the response is, from Braverman, is, I've presented and we voted on measures to detain and swiftly remove illegal migrants, and this weekend I met with refugees who have been successfully resettled in Rwanda and seen the accommodation people will be using. What has the Labour Party done? Well, the Shadow Home Secretary has gone on Twitter. She's very good at using Twitter. And this is at the same time, of course, as, again, government-friendly newspapers, I believe this was the Mail, said that Starmer was instrumental in keeping what they called foreign criminals, which were actually, again, Windrush deportees who would have been deported to their deaths in Jamaica from probably some shit they did when they were 18. I don't know.
Or just were like accused of when they were 18. Because this being, you know, the 70s or the 80s, how the fuck do you know?
What they said is that he kept foreign criminals in the country and can't be trusted to get them out. So all of this agreeing with the framing, all of it, all of this abdication of responsibility to oppose on moral grounds, to be somehow involved in organizing against the fact that they are doing this, is basically coming to exactly the same end as it would have been if he actually did any of those things. The result from the papers, from the Tory party, from the people he is trying to very cleverly steal a march on by agreeing with them before they can castigate him for not doing it, the same fucking shit is happening. The same response is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have like a direct example. It's one of those relatively rare examples in life where you have a direct example of exactly the same fight happening 1 year ago. And Labour's failure to take a moral stance and to defend the right that we have in this country and around the world and that we've had for 70 years, that anybody can come to us and say, I'm a refugee, I need protection, and that we will give them a fair and individual assessment of that claim, right? That right, which necessarily happens by people entering the country sometimes through irregular means, was not defended last time. And that has completely left the ground open now for that right to be essentially extinguished in this country. I mean, I say essentially, to be completely, it was essentially last time. This time it will be completely extinguished in this country because that fundamental right for anybody to come here and say, I need asylum, is something that Labour failed to defend, and that many advocates actually, you know, against the bill last time also failed to take a stand on that basis. And what's happened under this bill is that, you know, by talking about groups that are hated by society, so that's foreign criminals, by talking about young men, by talking about Albanians, what the government is actually doing is introducing powers that discriminate absolutely, like, not at all, just simply on a completely blanket basis, deny the right to seek protection to anybody at all, which just goes to show, like, please, can this be the lesson for once and for all time, that we should never try to equivocate on these moral values. We should never accept that maybe the humanity of a young man from Albania is less so than of a child who comes from Sudan. Ukraine, yeah. Better example, right? We should never give ground on that, because when we gave ground last time, what happens is absolutely clear, which is that they will sweep away all of our rights. And once again, I say, you know, this is about having a fight about leaving the European Court on Human Rights at the next election. And those rights that are protected under that is not just the rights of refugees, it's of all of us. And this is a project that's been deliberately pursued. And it proves that we must stand ground for every single human right to human rights. I mean, it seems so basic, and yet the human rights lawyer leading the Labour Party doesn't seem to have got the memo, doesn't seem to have learnt the lesson. And obviously, you know, the government is at fault here, and the government is the key antagonist here. But there has been a failure, I think, across the board in terms of framing the argument and and presenting this issue, this isn't about small boats. This is about the UK. This is about what happens here. This is about anybody who enters the country through a vast range of different means, being trapped here in limbo, having the same thing that happened to the Windrush generation happen to them, being subject to the hostile environment, having no right to work legally. Most of these people will stay in that situation for their entire lives. They will be with no status in our communities for their entire lives. And obviously, they will be subject to massive exploitation. Obviously, this will be fuel for criminality across the country, like work exploitation for anybody who doesn't have the right to work will be massively increased. This is already a huge problem in the country. You want to talk about action?
I was just going to say, I think this is probably a good time to bring up one of the provisions of this bill, which says we will deprive people who are coming here irregularly of access to our world-leading modern slavery support system. So essentially, as you say about making diminishing human rights for all of us, basically implicitly saying, okay, we used to think that all slavery was bad. Now we are only willing to say some slavery is bad. And as soon as you lose that universal, then it becomes a negotiation of which slavery is bad. They say anyone illegally entering the UK will be prevented from accessing the UK's world-leading modern slavery support or abusing these laws to block their removal.
Modern slavery support is such a funny term, as though you're like calling a helpline and being like, I'm having trouble with my modern slavery.
To. Like the world leading like modern slavery is not that world leading, and we're still managing to try and exclude people from it.
I mean, every smuggler and every trafficker must vote Tory. I mean, that's absolutely guaranteed. This is, a foghorn to anybody who wishes to exploit and enslave people. That, hey, if they're foreign, then go ahead. We will never protect them. They're literally saying we will never protect the victims of slavery if you bring them to this country. If you bring them to this country through deception, they don't need to have anything to do with it. They can be that absurdly vulnerable example of a person. Like they could be a 6-year-old little girl, and if their trafficker brings them to the country through deception, they will never be able to benefit from protections against slavery. I mean, that is the level we are talking about. There's no hyperbole in what I just said. That is what we're talking about doing. And all in the name, again, of the dehumanization of a bunch of 25-year-old Albanian men. And that's the ground we ceded.
And what we talk about as well, right? The other side of this, right? There's what happens when you come in, but I think it's always important to remember is why coming in via an irregular route is so common is partly to do with and I sort of bring this up sort of repeatedly, it's partly to do with like airline travel regulations. If you fly in from, let's say, if you are in, I don't know, Iraq, and you get over to Turkey and you try to board a plane, you take a bus to Istanbul and you try to board a plane to the UK, they won't take you because if you don't already have a valid visa, which you can't get, then it's the airline's responsibility to pay the cost to fly you somewhere else. And so because they don't know if your claim's going to be accepted, an airline will not fly you if you don't already have a visa, basically. So if you want to know one of the reasons why people are coming via deception, it's because all of those, and it's not even like, that's not even our rule. That's a European level rule. Like there are a complex of rules, some of which are ours and some of which are related to us, that prevent anyone from getting here normally, basically.
Yeah, and just on that, because it is the basics, but I do get asked this. It's like, probably most of your listeners are, British or American maybe, yeah.
Some German.
Yeah, so you basically haven't experienced what it is like to get a visa to travel to America or Europe or wherever for people from countries where actual refugees flee. It's incredibly difficult. And we require visas for every country that might produce a refugee. And where there's a country that we don't require visas, so last year, we didn't used to have a visas requirement for people from El Salvador. And then the repression of the government in El Salvador increased, and a few hundred people started making their way to the UK and claiming asylum. And we immediately introduced visa requirements on El Salvador so that specifically so that people could no longer safely and legally make the journey to the UK by taking a plane. So it is impossible in most cases, in all cases as a refugee, to apply from outside of the UK for the paperwork that lets you enter the UK on a plane or on a ferry or on the Eurostar like anybody else would do it. And that is why people take these journeys. And ultimately, I do, on a podcast like this, like I shy away a little bit from saying like, well, the answer is safe routes. Like, yeah, sure, the answer is safe routes, but only on a kind of like big scale, right? So sure, we should introduce travel documents where people who are in northern France could apply on the basis that they would then enter the UK for the purpose of seeking asylum and enter our asylum system. But ultimately, any of these piecemeal solutions will always leave somebody out. And ultimately, that brings us back to the fact that we really do need to defend the principle that regardless of how you came to the UK, you need to be able to apply for asylum. And once you are established here and if you have family members here, if you have connections here, then that should be the basis for the right to build your life here without being subject to these incredibly draconian policies and the hostile environment.
What's really depressing to me is there is a strong liberal case for this. And not only is there a strong liberal case for this, but it's one that we have seen be made successfully. Angela Merkel did the big, sort of like Schaffen wir das, sort of like cultural shift in Germany. Germany took a shitload of refugees. And as much as, like blogs and people might like cry about it, it's been tremendously successful and it has helped a lot of people.
German children are being exposed to flavor.
Yeah, for the first time. And like, you would think maybe that this would be a place where a lifelong human rights lawyer might be interested to show some leadership and maybe sort of like try to drive public opinion instead of being led by it. But, Keir Starmer is a coward and, perfectly happy to sort of like concede that front to racism. So
well, he's busy with the great scourge of life in the UK, which is of course smelling weed on the street.
Yes, yeah, we'll talk about that on the crime episode. Yeah. But like, yeah,
yeah, and I think it also bears mentioning. Not only have we seen robust opposition to this succeed elsewhere, and a sort of much more open and welcoming policy towards refugees, specifically and immigrants generally.
Not just like elsewhere, but like in lots of places, and those countries have benefited from it. This is like something which will, like, again, this is an argument that I hate making, right? Because the argument...
It's the liberal case.
Yeah, it is the liberal case that, like, this will help our shitty economy, right? That, like, there are a bunch of people who want to come to this country and, like, live and work and spend money and make money and, like, all of that shit. That shouldn't be the reason why we, like, allow or even encourage them to come here, but it is also a benefit to us. And, like, no one makes this case with, like, any sort of degree of influence, and it's infuriating.
Yeah, I actually like the potholes, and I like the shit puddles and everything. So, and also, if you make the country better, then what are you going to do with all those posters saying the UK is shit?
Oh, that's true. You'd have to take them down before
there's a lot of work.
So I don't want to waste that money retrospectively.
I was doing a video with Refugee Action the other week and met a bunch of refugees, and we were talking about how, like, just all the ones who are still in the asylum system aren't allowed to work, and how they've been one of the campaigns that they're doing is about allowing people who are in the asylum system to work. And they said that, kind of going back to what you were saying, Alice, like a surprising number of really right-wing Tory MPs agreed to support this motion on the basis that asylum seekers are a burden on the taxpayer. And so it was like the weirdest like horseshoe meme of like asylum seekers do actually want to work. And actually you can sort of make a right-wing argument for allowing them to work, even though that isn't the reason why you want to allow them to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, I do support that campaign, but I would argue, and sorry to be nitpicky about this, this is just how I am. I'm such a dick. You don't have to give asylum seekers the right to work if you give them a decision within a couple of months on their claim. And then the people who really need the right to work are the people who have been living here long term, undocumented, right? They're the people who are actually working in massive exploitation. We were talking about exploited migrant workers with Deliveroo and that kind of thing. Often we're talking about undocumented workers in those circumstances, people who have no recourse to, the very meager protections that exist for workers from exploitation in this country. If you report being exploited as an undocumented worker, and you're the one who's going to be locked up, not your employer. In fact, your employer might get like a bribe in order to turn you in. So the people who need the right to work will be the vast swathe. That number of people who are undocumented in this country is going to be massively increased if this bill comes into effect, and it will, because look at us. And those are the people who really need the right to work. I mean, yes. I mean, obviously, when you have a situation as you have now, where people spend on average over a year waiting for an asylum claim, and that's why they're holed up in these hotels and they don't have the right to work, that's absurd. And those people should be given the right to work. But the only reason why they would ever need it is because the system is so stupid and such a failure.
But this also goes back to one of the things I was saying earlier, right? We've seen these sort of more humane policies to do with refugees and asylum seekers work well elsewhere. And we have seen, when there is opposition to it, those self-same policies to demonize and exclude and exploit and so on refugees and asylum seekers eat fucking shit. All they have to be is opposed. And so it comes, if you want to think of this in terms of party politics, which I think we're conditioned to because of our media environment and because of the way that our institutions are set up, they have sort of monopolized quite a bit of this power and excluded people from bottom-up participation. So why wouldn't you? But at this point, this is why, if you want to say who is the greatest enemy to progress, or who's the greatest enemy to this being a humane and human place to live, a place that you would be proud to be associated with, and so on, the greatest obstacle at this point is the people who are sitting on the button that says oppose this and refusing to press it for reasons of triangulation, for the reasons that they believe that these beliefs, their beliefs about these beliefs, are that they emerge naturally, that they come from the fellow feeling of co-nationalists, and that they are not, crucially, the result of a campaign that is now demanding further satisfaction. They do not and cannot see the ratchet.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately unconvincing as well to argue that, by tinkering around the edges and by a different kind of police patrol in France, you're actually going to solve this issue. The problem is that, the Tories have gone big and bold now with their suggestions. This won't solve the issue, but it will fundamentally change the picture, right? And what Labour's response is completely lacking in any meaningful, getting to grips with what this problem actually looks like. Look at it longer term. People are not stupid. They know that migration is not going to stop. You look at the climate catastrophes that are displacing more and more communities worldwide. It's this week we had that report that largely went ignored from the IPCC, talking about how we're basically not on track to even reach 1.5 degrees of warming. This is going to cause massive displacement. People are always going to move. And that's out of being forced by climate catastrophe and instability and oppression, but it's also just because that's what humans do. And it's actually, as we were saying before, a positive for almost everybody involved, right? It's a wonderful thing that, it's just a basic human thing. But people will always move, and we need to have responses from the other side of politics that actually get to grips with a world of mobility. And how can we make that look like something that works for us, for our communities, and works for the people who are on the move as well, and works for other countries, and takes into account the basic reality that other countries are real countries, which seems to be lacking in this discussion entirely. So on the one hand, you have this extreme, absolutely horrendous, horrific extremism, but is being matched by a sort of wishy-washy, we'll pretend the issue away, and people are not convinced by it. It's ultimately not convincing that Starmer's deal with Macron is going to actually fix this issue in a way that, Sunak's couldn't. It's got to be a bigger, more ambitious and more brave political idea that talks about how we actually manage mobility in a world where people will always move.
Well, all I'll say is we tried that once, but this goes back to what you were saying about the ECHR as well, right? And, with that, at the moment, right, the next election looks like it's going to return a Labour government, more or less by default, with a Ba'ath Party margin by some polls. And
a margin not seen since the Iraq War.
Yeah. And if you sort of commit the ultimate sin in Britain and remember a few years ago, you'll remember that
Careful.
a fractious Tory party and fractious right wing was united by a popular in-press demand to leave a supranational institution, which, as you say, this is going to create. And so
we're going to take back control again.
And so, we're going to take back control again, take it harder. The only thing that's different, right, is that it's just a different institution. And the only thing that's going to stop, in my view, unless, again, some other very unexpected thing happens, but if things continue as they are, the Labour Party, by sheer default, by not being the people that fucked up your mortgage or whatever, that there's the only thing that's going to stop them from returning a Ba'ath Party margin is going to be if the right unites around a take back control narrative on leaving a supranational institution, which they're preparing the ground for now, and Starmer seems to be walking the fuck into.
It is funny, though, to imagine that because they're going to have to start, no one really ever thought about, these kind of agreements before politics got insane, whereas, the EU was always something that people did bang on about a bit. But you can imagine, increasingly, they're going to have to start leaving more and more niche, organizer. We're going to take back control from Scientifique International. We're getting rid of the kilogram. We're going back to the fucking furlong, the fathom, the pound weight.
Sick of being bossed around by the World Intellectual Property Office.
Well, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because the arguments that I have had over the last few years, and you're right that this hasn't been on the radar that much, but where people have been arguing that we should be withdrawing from international human rights treaties is on the basis we're the UK. We invented the concept of human rights. Yeah, okay. I'm quoting, right? And so we don't need these supranational bodies to tell us what to do. We can enforce human rights ourselves much better. And then you come to the point where we're actually going to, have the fight about leaving them. And it is entirely on the basis that we want to take away rights under those conventions. So it's a very interesting flip here from having been we don't need this international body to tell us how to enforce human rights. We enforce human rights better than anybody, to being no. We want to remove human rights from this despised minority group. And therefore, we have to leave these conventions.
Well, all I can say is, in 20 years, I'm really looking forward to Suella Braverman's podcast with, Nigella Lawson, Rory Stewart,
Andrew Tate.
Whoever. Yeah.
The human trafficker, come on. She's doing a podcast with a boat. And they're settling their differences.
Saying, I wish that all had never happened. But I think that probably about does us for today. It seems like a good place as any to end. So, Zoe, I want to thank you very much for coming on and bringing all of this knowledge today.
Thank you very much for having me, as always.
And I want to
chilling reminder of things to come, as always.
Sorry for being the harbinger of doom, as always.
We love to harbing.
Thank you for reminding us that things might be bad now, but they could and probably will be worse.
Oh, they always can be worse,
That's,
always.
That's the TF promise, baby.
Yeah, that's what, every episode. That's what we deliver for you. And again, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, there's a Patreon, $5 a month. You can subscribe to it. Milo has various dates in Australia. You can find them on his website.
Please, the Melbourne Comedy Festival, the 29th of March to the 23rd of April. I have not sold many advance tickets. I can't stress enough how expensive this trip is. Please.
He's waking up at 5 a.m. to podcast for all you people.
That's right.
So, otherwise, there's the Twitch stream. It's 9 to 11 on Mondays and Thursdays. There's other things. You know the stuff.
Theme song. Here we go by Jim.
Yeah, the theme song. Here we go by Jim. Listen to it on Spotify. Listen to it early. Listen to it often. And we will see you on the bonus episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.